My parents told me they could only afford to take one daughter to Greece. They chose my younger sister. When they returned, the house was nearly empty. My key was on the counter, and they understood I was not coming back. When my parents returned from Athens, the house looked as if someone had erased half their life. A pale rectangle marked where the television had hung. The sectional sofa was gone, along with 2 chairs and the oak table I had assembled while my father watched baseball and called me the practical one. In the kitchen, the refrigerator had left a clean square on the floor. The dishwasher and microwave were missing too. Even the dining table was gone. All that remained was an envelope beside my old house key. On the front, I had written one word: family. I know how they reacted because my sister, Chloe, called 2 days later, crying so hard I could barely understand her. My mother left 14 voicemails. The first sounded confused. The next 5 were furious. By the final message, her voice had softened into something like heartbreak. My father sent one text: "You have 48 hours to return everything before I call the police." I read it from the porch of a rented cabin outside Flagstaff, Arizona. The air smelled of pine and rain. A mug of coffee cooled between my hands. For once, nobody was asking me to fix anything. To understand why I emptied that house, you need to understand the numbers. And to understand the numbers, you need to understand the dinner. My name is Eleanor Price. I'm 30 years old and work as a financial auditor, which is almost funny considering how long I refused to audit my own family. I spent my career finding missing money for companies while ignoring where my own paycheck disappeared. My parents are Graham and Susan Price. My father was a warehouse manager until he retired 3 years ago. He called it a reward for decades of work. He never mentioned that I covered part of their mortgage, car payments, and insurance while he adjusted. My mother is affectionate, charming, and disconnected from financial consequences. She remembers every birthday, cries during old movies, and turns requests for money into speeches about loyalty. "We take care of each other," she always said. What she meant was that I took care of them. My sister Chloe is 25. She is warm, funny, beautiful, and accustomed to being rescued before she realizes she is in trouble. She is not cruel. She grew up in a family where my sacrifices were treated like electricity, always available, rarely noticed. The first time my parents asked me for money, I was 22. I had just started my first accounting job, earned $51,000 a year, and lived in a tiny apartment with a broken heater. Mom called one night to say their furnace had failed. They needed $900 immediately. Only until Friday, she promised. Friday came and went. The money never returned. Neither did the pattern.
Over the next 8 years, one emergency became dozens. The washer broke, then the dryer. Dad needed dental work. Chloe's car required a new transmission. The property tax bill arrived unexpectedly. Whenever I hesitated, Mom reminded me that I was the stable one. "You don't have children yet," she would say. "You have more flexibility." Flexibility became the polite word for surrender. By 29, I had paid their mortgage 13 times. I had replaced most appliances in their house. I had covered bills, Chloe's rent deposit, and payments on his SUV. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Temporary lasted nearly a decade. The dinner happened on a Thursday in April. I drove an hour after work to make rosemary chicken, glazed carrots, and the potato dish Mom loved. I cooked for them twice a month. Nobody had asked me to. It had become my responsibility. Mom waited until we started eating. "We have wonderful news," she said. She wore the smile she used when a decision had already been made without me. "Your father and I are taking Chloe to Greece this August. 12 days. Athens, Santorini, and Crete." I thought I had misunderstood. "That sounds incredible," I said. "Are all of us going?" Dad lowered his eyes. "The thing is, Ellie," Mom said, "we can only afford to bring one of you." One of you. I was only 30. I had spent thousands on their house. I had delayed replacing my car because Dad's needed tires. I had skipped a vacation because Mom needed help with a hospital bill. Still, I was one of 2 children competing for a seat. "I understand," I said. Chloe looked embarrassed. Then she smiled. "I'll bring you something back." Dad laughed as if she had made a harmless joke. That laugh changed everything. It was not loud or cruel. That made it worse. It was casual. The sound of someone who saw nothing strange in excluding the daughter who financed the life around him. Something inside me went still. I finished dinner, cleared the plates, and packed the leftovers. I scrubbed the roasting tray because the dishwasher I had bought them was making a grinding noise. Mom hugged me at the door. "Don't be upset, sweetheart. You're independent. You can travel whenever you want." I drove home in silence. At my apartment, I opened my laptop. I am an auditor. I keep records. I had bank transfers, receipts, warranties, and texts reaching back to graduation. Every request was there, every promise to repay me, every thank you that became expectation. For 4 nights, I built a spreadsheet. I listed every mortgage payment, repair, appliance, bill, loan installment, and temporary emergency. I matched dates to receipts. I checked the total 3 times. The final number was $118,640. I stared until it no longer looked like money. It looked like years. Every plan I had postponed, every time I had confused being needed with being loved. That night, I understood I would never recover the money, but I could recover myself.
The next morning, I contacted an attorney. Her name was Maya Bennett, a civil property lawyer known for staying calm when everyone else became emotional. Her office was quiet and neatly labeled. I handed her a summary and explained everything calmly. Maya listened until I finished. "How much can you prove?" she asked. "Almost all of it. Receipts? For every appliance and most furniture. Bank transfers? Downloaded and organized. Messages showing they asked you to pay? Years of them." She removed her glasses. "The money you gave voluntarily is probably gone," she said. "What they did may be selfish, but it is not necessarily illegal." I nodded. "But the property is different. If you bought those items in your name, kept the receipts, and never transferred ownership, they may still belong to you. The television, furniture, and appliances? If your documentation supports it, yes. They leave for Greece in 7 weeks. Then prepare. Take only what is yours. Photograph everything. Use insured movers. Leave no damage. And do not warn them." For the first time since dinner, I felt something other than humiliation. I felt a plan. For 7 weeks, I behaved exactly as my family expected. I helped Chloe choose luggage, ordered phone adapters, and found sandals for the streets of Athens. I sat beside Mom while she compared hotels she had already booked. Dad complained about baggage fees. I listened politely. Meanwhile, I documented the house. During each visit, I photographed another room. I matched serial numbers to receipts, warranties, and delivery confirmations. Maya connected me with an inventory specialist named Tessa. She reviewed my files and showed me how to record each item so there could be no believable accusation later. The final inventory was 52 pages. The television had cost me $1,950. The sectional sofa was $2,700. The refrigerator was $1,680. The washer and dryer were $1,340. The dining table and chairs were $1,100. There were also lamps, shelves, rugs, and kitchen appliances. I had furnished their comfort one emergency at a time. The night before their flight, I reviewed the list again. Nothing sentimental was included. No birthday gifts, no photographs, no inherited dishes, only items I had purchased, registered, and never given away. For once, the records in my hands felt stronger than guilt. At 6 the next morning, I drove to their house. Mom rushed between rooms, checking passports and medication. "Could you collect the mail while we're gone?" she asked. "Of course." Chloe came downstairs wearing the linen dress I had altered. "Please don't let Mom reorganize my closet." "I won't." Dad loaded their suitcases into the airport shuttle. Before getting in, he looked at me. "Enjoy the peace and quiet." "I plan to," I said. The shuttle disappeared around the corner. I waited until the street was empty. Then I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and called the movers.
The moving crew arrived at 9. Their supervisor, Marcus Hale, had spent 20 years relocating families and people leaving situations they no longer wanted to explain. He glanced at the inventory binder, then at the rooms. "Everything is documented? Receipt, serial number, photograph, and warranty." He turned several pages. "You point," he said. "We move." The television came down first. When the screen lifted away from the wall, it revealed a bright rectangle untouched by dust and sunlight. I had bought it after Dad complained that the old one was too small for football. He had thanked me for 2 days. Next came the sectional. Marcus separated the pieces while another mover wrapped them in blankets. The coffee table followed, then the armchairs and lamps. By 11, it no longer looked warm or familiar. It looked temporary, like a rental waiting for new occupants. The kitchen was harder. I emptied the refrigerator and placed the food in coolers. Then I disconnected the water line while Marcus pulled the appliance away. The dishwasher required more work. I shut off the supply, removed the lower panel, and checked twice for leaks. I'd installed enough things there to know how to remove them. We took the microwave, espresso machine, and kitchen island. We left every gift. Mom's birthday wine rack stayed. So did the mixer I'd given her one Christmas, and the knife set Dad opened on Father's Day. Maya's rule repeated in my head. Take what belongs to you, not what hurts them most. Upstairs, I cleared the few things stored in my childhood bedroom. A bookshelf, reading chair, brass lamp, and 3 boxes of records. I left the photographs. I left the quilt my grandmother made. I left every object whose value came from memory instead of money. By late afternoon, the truck was full. The house had become quiet in a way I had never heard before. Without the refrigerator humming, television muttering, or washing machine shaking, nothing disguised the emptiness. I walked through each room with my phone, recording the walls, floors, pipes, and outlets. No holes, no broken fittings, no damage. Only absence. At the kitchen counter, I placed a thick envelope beside my key. On the front, I wrote, "Family." Inside was a copy of the financial record, arranged year by year. The numbers were enough. At the end, I added, "I am finished being useful only when you need money. I am finished being the first daughter you call in a crisis and the last daughter you choose for joy. Everything removed from this house was purchased and legally owned by me. Do not contact me unless you are prepared to speak honestly." I signed my name. Then I locked the back door, set the key on the envelope, and walked outside. Marcus waited beside the truck. "Ready?" he asked. I looked at the house once, not because I wanted to remember it, because I wanted to be certain I was leaving. "Yes," I said. For the first time in years, the word felt simple.
The cabin outside Flagstaff cost more than I had planned, but I booked it anyway. It stood at the edge of a pine forest, with a narrow porch and blue kitchen cabinets. I spent the first day unpacking everything into a storage unit near my apartment. Then I drove north with one suitcase and turned off my phone. For 12 hours, nobody could reach me. It was the most peaceful half day of my adult life. I switched the phone on the next morning. There were 31 missed calls. Mom's first message arrived 20 minutes after they returned home. "Ellie, where is the television?" The next came 6 minutes later. "This is not funny. Call me immediately." Then Dad, "You have stolen from your own family. Return everything today." Chloe sent photographs of the empty rooms as though I had not emptied them. What were you thinking? Not one message asked where I was. Not one asked whether I was safe. Not one mentioned the envelope. They noticed the missing furniture before the missing daughter. I placed the phone face down and made coffee. At noon, Maya called. "Your father contacted the police," she said. I waited for fear, but it did not come. What happened? He reported theft and property damage. An officer reviewed the evidence package we submitted before the move, and he told your parents this appears to be a civil property dispute, not a criminal matter. The receipts, registrations, and photographs establish ownership. The video shows no damage. I sat on the porch step. So they can't force me to return anything? Not based on what we have. If they sue, we will respond. But their argument is that your property became theirs because they used it for years. I laughed before I could stop myself. It was not amusement. It was the sound of pressure leaving somewhere deep inside me. Then I cried. I cried for the money, but mostly for the woman who had handed it over, believing each payment purchased a place in the family. I cried until the coffee went cold. That evening, Mom left a voicemail. Her voice was quieter. "I read your letter," she said. "I don't understand why you never told us you felt this way." I listened twice, then I deleted it. I had told them every time I hesitated. Every time I said I could not keep covering their bills. Every time Dad called me dramatic and Mom reminded me that families help without keeping score. They had heard me. They preferred the version of my answer that ended with yes. On the third day, Chloe called. This time, I answered. "The house looks horrible," she said. "Empty rooms usually do. You took the sofa. I bought it. And the refrigerator. I bought that too." She went silent. "How are we supposed to know you considered all of it yours?" "Because my name is on every receipt." "That's not what I mean." "I know."
Family should not empty one daughter so the other can remain comfortable, I said. You did not lose me when I moved the furniture.
You lost me while I was still sitting at your table, paying for everything, and none of you noticed." For once, Chloe had no quick answer. When she spoke again, her voice was small. "Do you hate me?" I looked through the trees toward the red cliffs in the distance. A hawk circled above them, moving without hurry. "No," I said. "I have simply stopped financing you." I ended the call before she could turn that sentence into another request. 11 days later, a letter from Dad arrived at my apartment. He must have found the address through the forwarding notice. His handwriting was sharp and tilted, each word pressed hard into the paper. There was no greeting. "You will regret choosing furniture over blood." He signed it Graham, not Dad. I read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in the evidence binder behind the police report. For years, I had searched for proof that my father cared about me beyond what I'd provided. That letter gave me the opposite answer with perfect clarity. The furniture was not the betrayal. My refusal to keep serving him was. 6 weeks after the move, I visited Maya again. Legally, there was nothing left to settle. My parents had threatened lawsuits, but no attorney had contacted us. I went because I needed to understand why leaving had felt less like anger and more like grief. "Did you think I would actually do it?" I asked. Maya studied me over her glasses. "You came to my office with years of organized records," she said. "People who are only angry bring stories. People who are ready to leave bring documentation." I did not feel ready. "You were already saying goodbye. You were just finishing the paperwork." Her words stayed with me. The goodbye had not happened when the movers arrived. It happened at dinner, when Dad laughed. Everything afterward, the travel adapters, the altered dress, the hotel research, had been a final ceremony. I had spent 7 weeks offering kindness to people I already knew I could no longer trust. The cabin was where I finally stopped performing. I slept late, I hiked without checking my phone, I ate sandwiches for dinner and left the dishes until morning because nobody would judge me. On my final night there, rain struck the metal roof for hours. I sat by the window and opened the spreadsheet one last time. $118,640. For years, that number had represented failure. It was proof I had been manipulated, proof I should have said no sooner. But I began to see something else. It also proved I was capable of loyalty, discipline, and generosity. Those qualities were not mistakes. The mistake was giving them to people who treated my care as a permanent resource. I closed the file. Then I renamed the folder. It had been called Family Expenses. I changed it to Closed Accounts. For the first time, the name made me smile without pain.
6 months later, I live in an apartment that is entirely and deliberately mine. The sectional sofa sits beneath the window because I paid for it and because it is comfortable. I refuse to let a good piece of furniture become a monument to my family. The television hangs on my wall. The refrigerator hums in my kitchen. On Sundays, the rooms smell like whatever I decide to cook. For myself, for friends who ask how I am before asking for anything else, and sometimes for a man I have been seeing who always arrives with wine and insists on washing the dishes. I no longer cook for my parents. I speak to Mom occasionally. The calls are short and carefully bounded. She asks about work and the weather. I ask whether she is taking her medication. Neither of us mentions the empty house unless she circles toward it indirectly. Twice she has said, "I didn't realize." I believe her. I'd also understand that not noticing someone's exhaustion for 8 years is its own kind of choice. She has never offered a complete apology. There's always a sentence afterward. "I didn't realize, but you should have spoken up." "I didn't realize, but taking everything was extreme." She wants forgiveness to arrive before responsibility. I am no longer willing to arrange that for her. I have not spoken to my father since his letter. He sent 2 more messages through Mom. One said I was tearing the family apart. The other said he hoped I was proud of myself. I was. Not of hurting them, not of the empty rooms or the fear in Chloe's voice. I was proud that, for once, their discomfort did not become my emergency. Last month, Chloe emailed me. The message was 8 lines long. I read it 5 times, searching for the request hidden inside it. There was none. She said she had started seeing a therapist. She said she had been thinking about what I told her at the cabin, that I had disappeared while I was still sitting beside them. She apologized for Greece, but also for everything around it, for accepting help without asking what it cost me, for treating my apartment, time, and paycheck as resources that would always be available, for the dinner, for laughing along after Dad laughed. I had forgotten she did that. Apparently, she had not. She ended the email by saying she did not expect me to answer. For 3 weeks, I did not. I drafted replies and deleted them. One was gentle enough to reopen everything. One was so cold that it felt written by my father. The third simply said, "I believe you are sorry." That was true, but it was not enough. I am learning that an apology can be sincere without creating an obligation. Someone can change and still not be entitled to immediate access to the person they hurt. Forgiveness is not the same as returning a key. Understanding is not the same as reopening a door. For now, Chloe remains on the other side of mine. I do not know whether that distance will last forever. I only know I finally get to choose it myself.
The strangest part of changing my life was discovering how much time had been hidden inside my obligations. Saturday mornings used to belong to grocery lists, repairs, errands, and calls that began with, "Since you're already coming over." Now I wake up without an assignment. Sometimes I read until noon. Once I spent an afternoon assembling a bookshelf for myself. No one watched from a chair. No one told me I was better at that sort of thing. When I finished, I stood back and laughed because the shelf was slightly crooked and nothing terrible happened. My therapist says I am learning to live without earning permission. I started seeing her a month after returning from Arizona. "I want to stop feeling guilty when nobody is angry with me," I said. She did not look surprised. We talked about how responsibility had become my identity. As a child, I packed Chloe's school lunches when Mom overslept. I reminded Dad about appointments. Whenever I handled a crisis, everyone praised me. "What a mature girl. What would we do without you?" I thought those sentences meant I was loved. Now I hear the warning inside them. "What would we do without you?" was never gratitude. It was a job description. The financial changes came quickly once I stopped supporting them. I paid off my credit card balance. I increased my retirement contributions. I opened a savings account labeled mine and transferred money into it every payday. For the first time, my future mattered in my budget. It finally did. My parents struggled after I left. Mom told me they sold Dad's SUV and bought a used sedan. They replaced the refrigerator with a smaller model. Chloe moved in with 2 roommates and began paying her own phone bill. Each detail arrived wrapped in accusation. "We had to sell the car. We can't afford what we used to. Your sister is having a difficult year." At first, every sentence activated the old reflex. I imagined opening my banking app, moving money, making the discomfort disappear. Then I waited. The feeling always passed. They adapted. They had never been incapable. They had simply learned that my rescue arrived faster than their consequences. Without me, Dad compared prices, Mom created a budget, Chloe found roommates. The world did not end. Only the system did. One evening, Mom called while I was making dinner. "Your father misses you," she said. I stirred the soup and watched steam cloud the window. "He knows my number." "He is proud. You know how he is." "Yes," I said. "I do." She became quiet. "I wish we could go back to normal." Normal. The word almost made me sad. Normal was me paying their mortgage and being left out of Greece. Normal was bringing dinner to a table where my place depended on how useful I was. "I don't," I said. Mom began to cry softly. For once, I did not rush to comfort her. I let the silence exist between us. Then I said goodnight and returned to my soup. It needed nothing from me except time.
There is one question people ask when they hear this story. Was taking the furniture worth losing my family? The question assumes I still had the family I thought I had. I had parents who called when a bill arrived, a sister who accepted my help as naturally as breathing, and a place at the table that existed only while I kept making myself useful. What I lost was the role they assigned me. What I gained was a life. The $118,640 will probably never return. I once imagined what it might have become: a down payment, savings, vacations I postponed, or a vehicle that did not shake. Instead of mourning every dollar, I think of it as tuition. It taught me that generosity without boundaries becomes permission. Sacrifice does not become sacred because someone calls it family. Saying no does not make me cruel. I eventually replied to Chloe. I told her I believed her apology was sincere and was glad she was examining the pattern. I also said I was not ready to rebuild our relationship. She answered once.
I understand. I'll be here if you ever want to talk. There was no guilt or request. Mom still calls every few weeks. Our conversations remain deliberate. Last Sunday, she said the washing machine was making a strange noise. My body tightened before she added, "We called a repair company. I just thought you might know what the sound means." I gave her a suggestion. I did not offer money, she did not ask. It proved another relationship might be possible, but only if the old one stays buried. Dad has not changed. According to Mom, he still tells relatives I stripped the house over a vacation. Maybe that version is easier. In his story, I am a spoiled daughter who chose objects over blood. He never has to mention the mortgage payments or his laugh at dinner. I have stopped needing him to tell the truth. I have the receipts. I have my own memory. Sometimes, late at night, the refrigerator in my apartment switches off and the rooms become silent. At first, that silence reminded me of the house after the movers finished. Now it feels different. The silence is not punishment. It is space. Space for plans that do not include rescuing anyone. Space for friendships that are reciprocal. Space for mistakes, rest, and ordinary weekends. Space to discover who Eleanor Price is when she is not managing a crisis. My father said I would regret choosing furniture over blood. He misunderstood. I did not choose furniture. I chose the woman who had spent 8 years buying everyone else a comfortable life while leaving her own unfinished. The sofa, television, and refrigerator were only objects. They were never the point. The point was that I finally stopped confusing exhaustion with love. When my parents returned from Greece, they found an empty house and believed I had taken everything. They were wrong. I left every gift that was truly theirs. I left the memories. I left the excuses. And for the first time in my life, I took myself.